I can't just drive to my kid's baseball game, get out of the car and walk. I have to Google Map without exaggeration. I have to look at away games for soccer, baseball, anything my kids are in to make sure I know where are the exits, where are the entrances, where am I parking, where am I walking, what am I doing? If he's here, where can I go? It's exhausting, but that has been my reality because to your point, no one stops him. You know, when I go to the police, they're like, well, he's not really doing anything illegal.
Welcome back, everybody, to Prey versus Predator, the podcast. We are very excited that you are here with us today. We at PVP are really focused on bringing Prey a language for coercive control so that you can identify it and know what you're in, know what you're up against, and know how to ideally survive it and get through it. And Jill, you're introducing our guest today.
Absolutely. Courtney, you are here with us again for another episode. Courtney Gilmartin, she started NewJerseyProtectiveMoms.org. In our previous episode, if you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen. She told us a wee bit of her story, and it is shocking, but not unexpected. The more people we talk to, the more patterns we see. And when we left off with you, Courtney, you had filed for divorce, and he was claiming parental alienation, and things, just when you thought things couldn't get lower, things went lower. So, Courtney, welcome here. We're so pleased to talk to you. So sorry for what you have experienced, but you know that your story is going to bring strength to a lot of people.
I hope so.
Yeah.
When I filed, things got bad. He immediately, of course, they can't take any responsibility or accountability for anything. So obviously this was not his fault. I was having this affair, and I was this horrible person who was running around town with different men. And so the insanity began. So I found him one day he had been staying with his mom, and I found him one day in the driveway in my car. And this was again in 2016. So I had like a paper calendar and, phone book with all my contacts written down. And he was in there taking pictures of everyone's number and going through all my personal items. So that was when I filed for the first restraining order. Shortly after he left my house that day, he started incessantly calling all of my friends, my boss at the time. I had sold my business and I was doing some freelance consulting, and I was working with a gentleman who I'd met through other business contacts who was gay. We were not having an affair, but he was convinced that we were. And so I had to get the restraining order at that point. And so, of course, the rhetoric began in court that I was leveraging the restraining order to keep him away from the kids. And I was, making up false claims of DV. And, I should be ashamed of myself because I make women who really experience domestic violence look bad. And I'm just this terrible person.
And this is all coming from him or his lawyer, or who is this coming from? Both. Yeah.
Probably behind the scenes, his lawyer, but both.
Yeah.
So that was the pedestal they stood on, and we went back and forth and we negotiated civil restraints, which is basically just a glorified consent order. You both agree to certain things. We won't talk badly about one another. We'll be nice to one another. He was not going to be able to come back to the home. He was going to stay with family until he found a place. And we settled on a limited parenting time schedule for him with the kids. And the kids at this point were young. They were 5 and 3. So they were okay with going. But as time progressed and they got their own independence is when things got really, really bad. So the divorce went on. It was ugly, like most, in dealing with someone like this. So there was an incident at a drop-off. Drop-off was always a source of problems between us, because anytime people like this have access to you, whether it's written, oral, on the phone, in person, whatever, in person is worse for me. With him, they they cannot control themselves, they're going to cause problems. So there was an exchange with the kids, and he had the garage remote opener and a watch that I had bought him for a wedding present, and he threw them at me in front of the kids. So second restraining order, filed that. This time I kept it. And we went to trial, but unfortunately the judge was like, you guys are just not getting along. You need to get over it. We're not going to grant the final restraining order. In Jersey, it's tough to get finals, especially for non-physical behaviors. Like before we had coercive control, it was harassment, and a few other things I forget off the top of my head, but it's really hard to get those restraining orders in New Jersey because they're for life. And when I had the restraining order, though, he violated it. He came up to my car at an exchange and was screaming obscenities at me. He would drive past the house and beep and wave at me and the kids if we were outside. And I would always go to the police station or go to court, and say, like, he obviously doesn't care about the restraining order. He's driving by, he's beeping, he's waving. It's like a joke to him. That is a behavior that's a terroristic behavior, right?
Yeah.
He's in this sense, like, I can drive by, I can wave, I can see you, and nothing's going to happen to me. Intimidation, all of that, right? So even with the 2 violations, I still didn't get the final restraining order. So it's just more warnings from the judge. You guys need to get along. You have children. This insanity needs to stop. You need to get divorced. So we finally get divorced. And something really important that my lawyer and I made sure that we got in our marriage settlement agreement, or global settlement agreement, or MSA, whatever anyone refers to it as, we explicitly said in our agreement that we weren't happy with the custody situation, and we reserved the right to have a custody eval with no change in circumstance. And we named the expert that we wanted, which was an expert that I was told was very good and very well versed in IPV dynamics and domestic abuse dynamics. At the time, I didn't have the coercive control language. So we made sure that was in there. We agreed on that. Of course, getting divorced is like a game of chess. So I kind of had to give him a little bit more parenting time to get that in there, but it was in there, and that was really crucial. So I'll never forget the day we got divorced is, of course, my birthday. So that is always a rub, but we got divorced on my birthday, and I took back my maiden name, and he was giving me the middle finger as I was going over my maiden name, like changing it with the judge. And the judge yelled at him on the record, like, I see what you're doing. Stop giving her the middle finger, And even with that, I didn't have a restraining order at the time, but I remember sitting there thinking, looking at the judge, because it was the same judge. I was like, you probably wish that I had this restraining order now, because obviously someone who's going to give me the middle finger in the middle of a courtroom is an abuser. After we got divorced, it was just nonstop conflict over any decision about the kids' activities. We had a parenting coordinator at the time that we were supposed to use for expenses and making decisions. And I can remember I needed a passport for the kids because I was going to go to Mexico with the kids, and wouldn't sign the paperwork. The PC, made him sign the paperwork, finally signed the paperwork. And I'll never forget. I was like, please notarize the form. And the PC was like, no, I'm a lawyer. And in New Jersey, lawyers are notaries. I don't have to notarize the form. I'm like, please notarize the form, because if the form comes back, he's never going to sign again. Sure enough, the form comes back, because whoever processed it didn't realize that lawyers are notaries. And I had to get him back in the office to get him to sign it. It was like another 6 weeks. It was everything was awful. He would email the PC if he didn't like something that I did, disparaging me. He likes to use third parties as like someone to perform for. So he'll write these huge, long, scathing emails about me to them. Every year before school started, he would introduce himself to the kids' teachers and write this huge, long thing like, I just want to let you know that my ex-wife is like a whore and she runs around town drunk, and to my children's, teachers. And I'm mortified. So things like that started, and everyone would always say, oh, he's just upset. Give him a year, give him this, give him that. And, every year I'd be like, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years. And he's still not better. He's worse. He's flipping me and my friends off on the other side of the baseball field. He's, doing crazy things. And it just never got better. It just continued to get worse as time went on.
And it sounds like the terroristic part of this, I think, should not be minimized, because nobody is stopping him. Because in all of our minds, we imagine that, somebody's not allowed to do this to you, as if there's some kind of like universal law that's going to come and stop them from doing it.
Well, there should be.
Well, I know, but there's not. Point. Like in the middle of the field, or as you're in your front yard, the person is basically saying, I can access you when I want to, how I want to. No one is going to stop me. And in fact, even with restraining orders, no one's stopping him. He's still doing it in front of a judge. He's still doing it. And that's the part I think that I want to make sure that people really grasp, is that you're a woman sitting there with a man who is not just aggressive and frightening and traumatized you for years, but that he is not being stopped by anyone. And the message to him is like, well, you can't be, and maybe his supporters, his flying monkeys, he can't be doing anything that bad. I mean, if he was doing something that bad, somebody would stop him, right? No.
Yep.
No, somebody's not going to stop him.
That's exactly it. And he exhausts a lot of the professionals that have been involved, so they'll give up. So your point is just like fuel to his fire. He's like, well, look, they're not going to do anything either. I mean, he tried to physically fist fight our parenting coordinator because he tried to make him pay me expenses. He told me that if the kids came back from Mexico with a sniffle, that he was going to have CPS at my front door, like Child Protective Services. He's tried to fight my family, my friends. He tried to fist fight my friends at a fireman's fair in town when the kids were there. Cause he, to your point, no one stops him, and he tries to isolate me by making everybody else not want to be around me.
Right.
If he's acting like a lunatic at the soccer field and flipping me off and screaming, everyone's looking at him and me, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
What did you do?
Yeah. Nuts. So you get this scarlet letter, guilt by association, because of them. And, I live in a very small town. It's hard. I've had problems with this because people are like, I don't want to be on the other side of that. I talked about it in the other episode where I said, like, he had flying monkeys, but those people started to become more like intimidated or scared of him.
Yeah.
And then people started to kind of shy away from me because they didn't want to be on the other side of him. He's emailed coaches of my kids things about me. He's emailed, my kids play basketball for travel teams, and it's parent coaches, and he'll attack them if they're friends with me. Anyone that's friends with me is a target for him. And it's devastating to me from a social perspective. And not only that, to the kids.
Right.
And as that behavior just continued to go on is when I educated myself more. Of course, and it's no way to live, but, I had to make sure I wasn't going places where he was, or, I wouldn't leave sporting events before he would in the car, because he had a habit of tailgating me and following me and terrorizing me in the car. I had to make sure I couldn't park near him in parking lots because he would always drive his car at me to try to intimidate and scare me, and then swerve at the last second, but act like he was going to hit me. So you change, your whole behavior because of things that he's done. I wouldn't stand near him at sporting events. I would, if it was, somewhere that I knew, I'd sit in my car. If I could see my son playing baseball, I'd sit and watch from my car because I didn't want to have to walk past him because he'd say things. So constantly living in that hypervigilant state is so exhausting. And that's what really compounds that PTSD for a lot of victims or prey, because you're constantly thinking, I can't just drive to my kid's baseball game, get out of the car and walk. I have to Google map, without exaggeration. I have to look at away games for soccer, baseball, anything my kids are in, to make sure I know where are the exits, where are the entrances, where am I parking, where am I walking, what am I doing? If he's here, where can I go? It's exhausting, but that has been my reality, because to your point, no one stops him. When I go to the police, when I've gone to the police, they're like, well, he's not really doing anything
Right.
illegal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he is,
because we don't have coercive control codified, right? And so all of this stuff to their ear doesn't make, they don't understand what they're looking at. They don't understand what you're saying, because we don't, even Evan Stark himself says he didn't understand what women were talking about when he interviewed them, because they would be like, yeah, but Evan, like, the physical abuse isn't the worst thing. And he was like, yeah, just talk about the physical abuse, because that's all he understood. And it took 20 years, or maybe 10 in his case, for him to start going like, maybe we should listen and hear like what they're really saying. And that changed everything for him. But our court systems and, the police departments and the social workers and these systems, there still seems like 20 years behind this information. And
well, because it also doesn't sound real. Like we were even talking off air how, like, sometimes you hear these stories and you're like, oh, like it's so far-fetched, some of the stories, or that he would do that. Like
he's not allowed
do
to.
that. Yeah. And it's like, no, these are real stories. This is a real problem, obviously, because if someone who is a prey and has been surrounded by prey and are just nice, healthy people, this is not what healthy people do.
It just doesn't compute.
It doesn't compute. And we want our audience and listeners to understand that this does happen. And maybe it's, a person that who's experiencing this, or maybe you've experienced it and you didn't realize that there was a term for it. So I thank you for this story, but I want people to understand that this is all true.
Yeah,
this is your story.
And I want you to talk about reunification therapy, because that's something that we really haven't talked that much about on the podcast. Can you explain to our listeners what it is and your experience?
And how you got there.
One thing I want to touch on quickly before that is, I also, to your point, I think a big component of the coercive controlling abusers or predators that is often overlooked is the stalking component of this. So much of what they do is stalking and surveillance. And there was a lot of behaviors. Now it's stopped because there's certain safeguards in place, like he's not allowed at my house and there's much more rigid rules. But a lot of him, he would just show up at my house on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday morning at 7:00 with a shoe or a cleat or a piece of clothing for the kids. And I would call the police and they're like, oh, well, he said he had to drop something off.
Right.
He didn't need to drop it off then. He was stalking me to see who was here. I mean, there were years where I was worried about dating or having friends here, that if he were to show up, he would start a fight or he would scream, or if he was escalating. I mean, that is all to control me, control my life. And there's a huge stalking component to it, right?
Because there's a price to pay. You're going to pay a price, and you don't even know what the price is going to be, but it's going to be nasty if he finds anything that's outside of what he wants.
Yes. So the reunification therapy is something that I had to deal with in the last year, because finally the behaviors that my ex was doing to me when we separated, I naively thought would be siloed to me, but it started to permeate into his relationship with the kids. And it really, really came to a head when my daughter was in 6th grade. And, I live in a small beach town. So she was biking all around and she was with her friends and she has a cell phone and she wants to go out. And he always made it very adversarial between he and I. He lived in a different town. So it was always my town versus his town, and my friends versus his friends, and her friends versus his friends. So she was never really allowed to see her school friends on his time. So she was missing out on her social life for like 50% of her life, which to a 6th grader is devastating. So it was the summer after COVID, so summer of 2021, and he was pissed off about something and showed up at my house and busted in my front door and was screaming and yelling at me about getting the kids Apple Watches and, I'm a horrible mother and I just let the kids run around town. And that resulted in me getting my third restraining order. And then, my daughter shortly thereafter was like, I don't want to go with him anymore. He's crazy. He yells at me. He doesn't let me do anything. I can't talk to you on the phone. We were downgraded, her and I, into communicating via Snapchat because he would go in her room every night and look through her phone. And if she talked to me, she would get in trouble. So we weren't allowed to talk. I never could FaceTime or talk to my kids actually physically on the phone. They had to sneak like texts. So she was like, I don't want to go there anymore. And I couldn't, in my heart, knowing what he was doing and who he was, because at this time I had realized what coercive control was and the damage that it was doing to the kids. I couldn't gaslight my daughter anymore and saying, well, dad's just mad and dad's just this and he really loves you, because that's not love. And, my daughter was growing up and I'm like, I can't have her think that these behaviors are okay and then potentially get into a relationship where this is going to happen. So her kind of putting her own boundaries around the way her dad was treating her kind of catapulted me into really the 2 years of court nonstop litigation that resulted in her being ordered reunification therapy with him. So the kids, she was resistant to going. I had gotten the restraining order. He tried to have me committed. He went to the courthouse and said, my wife's crazy. She's like making up this story that I'm abusive.
This was when you divorced. You were divorced.
Yes. Yeah.
And
we got divorced finally in 2017.
So is he allowed to do that? Like, I didn't think divorce.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He filed an order to show cause. He said he needed sole custody of the children, that I was a danger to them and him and myself, and that he needed a restraining order against me and I needed to be committed. It didn't go anywhere because obviously like that's not really what an order to show cause is for. And yeah, he can't really do that. There was no reason for that. I was on the beach. My kids were in a surf lesson and the phone rang and it was a court. They're like, we're not really doing in-person hearings, but like he's here, he won't go away. Again, no one stopped him. He bullied them into letting him stand in that courtroom and tell the judge, she's crazy. She needs to be committed. And the judge let him. And she's like, well, you actually have a restraining order against you. And you have a restraining order against you. So now we're going to serve you with the restraining order, because they hadn't served him yet. So she's like, if you feel as though she's alienating you from your children, though, you need to file a regular motion. So she explained to him the process, because at the time he was pro se. So sure enough, 2 weeks later, I'm at my daughter's first home soccer game under the lights. It's a Friday night. Her whole travel team, family, all the families are there. We're all in the bleachers. We're all sitting. My mom is there. My sister's there. And this man comes up to me and I noticed he was watching me like as I was walking up, and he's like, are you Courtney Gilmartin? I'm like, yeah. He's like, you've been served. He hands me this giant stack of papers and I'm like, what? And then I look over and my ex is just sitting there with that smug look like he was when he smashed my computer that I talked about. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you want to humiliate and demoralize and embarrass me and intimidate me in front of everybody by serving me and basically just ruining my night to watch my daughter's first soccer game. So that started. So we went to court. He claimed alienation. The judge kind of threw the book at us. She made us go to co-parenting therapy, which was awful. We got another PC because he fired our first PC, and we were ordered to do the custody evaluation, which I wanted. So I was happy about that. So of course, my daughter still wouldn't go, and I didn't blame her because we knew he was mad. He was texting her that he was mad. He was texting me that he was mad. So I didn't make her go. I couldn't make her go. And I pleaded with him to, let's go to co-parenting therapy and work this out and talk and do the evaluation and see what it says. But he took me back to court, said, she's not listening to court orders. She doesn't care what you say. She's disrespectful, Your Honor. Look at her. She thinks she can do whatever she wants. She's brainwashing my children and I'm scared. I'm a loving father, the whole nine. So she was pissed, the judge, and she flipped custody and gave him 5 days a week. And I was only able to see the kids Tuesday and Wednesday for 6 months while he got his makeup time. So in that time, he was horrifically verbally and emotionally abusive to the kids. We got the custody evaluation. That took 13 months. And then once the evaluation was in, I had primary custody of the kids. I had sole decision making, and the kids were ordered to reunification therapy with him. And he was ordered to a litany of services.
So this is another thing that I want to park on for a second, because this is a guy who's got multiple restraining orders against him. Like, hi, Houston, we have a problem. We're not okay here. And the judge hears this magic word, parental alienation, which is like pseudoscience and it's grounded in a defense of sexual abusers. And somehow the court goes, oh, what a great idea. Before we have an evaluation, before we've talked to the child, before we have anybody with any actual education, because nobody with any actual education is going to use this term alienation. All the pseudo experts are making money. They're profiteers, basically. So you've got this situation where before anybody's actually done any research, we're going to give the children we're going to give this person with multiple restraining orders has a history of intimate partner violence, not physical, but mental and emotional. We're just going to give the kids to him. We're going to take them away from you because they don't want to go with him. So we're going to make them go with him. Like the inhumanity, like this is child abuse.
Well, and also their human rights. They have no human rights at that expense. You're just going, nope, you don't want to see him. Well, you get to be with him now. It's like, what?
And then great, 13 months later, you get an evaluation saying he's a terrible, human being, or at least not a safe person for the children to be with. But guess what? You just let him, the court, not you, the court just orders the children. And this happens
again and again.
Again and again and again.
And even with the evaluation, they were like, yes, he has problems. He has to work on them, but he needs to go get services, therapy, and your daughter has to go to reunification therapy. It's a therapeutic setting.
Right.
Which, the reunification therapist tried to spin, for me, she was definitely a spinster. She's like, well, it's good for her to have these tools for when she's older to deal with someone who's difficult. What if she has a difficult boss? I'm like, well, she could leave her job. Yeah. And also it's very different than a child where the power dynamic is so skewed that she's going to sit in a room and you're going to tell her that there's more to her relationship with dad than bad memories. And, various things came up throughout the visits, like he has the right to know where you are. And just that, like, talking over her, not listening to her, devaluing what she says, making excuses for his behavior is so damaging. My daughter left 9 times out of 10 in hysterical tears and hives. I mean, the reunification therapist literally wrote to the judge that she was breaking out in hives in the waiting room before she even got into the room with her dad, because she was having such a visceral reaction to having to see her dad and be in the same room as him.
So once again, we have professionals working as flying monkeys and working in supporting the abuser, supporting the unsafe parent, and sending the child into an unsafe situation.
Yeah, and then everyone my attorney, because I had gotten an attorney again once it got really bad and we were in court. And so once the evaluation came out and the report came out and I had primary custody and he had to go through all the services, the judge ordered monthly case management conferences. So we were in court once a month and sometimes twice for the entirety of 2023. And then we have a court date tomorrow, which will be our first for 2024.
It's horrific. Like we hear this and we just think how abusive this is to you because
and the kids
and because it's not just it's your time, it's your energy,
your financial resources.
It's your life.
And like for listeners who maybe aren't experiencing this, put yourself in that place. It is a form of abuse. This is
it's just a continuation.
It's continuation of the abuse that you suffered within your marriage.
Because it's not even like they'll get the evaluation report and say, you know what, I did really mess up. I want to make this right. Let me go get better. And then let's revisit this. Nope. We're going to be locked in conflict. I'm going to go to, he had a week of therapy and he was writing letters to the court that he's changed and he's healed and I'm the abuser and I need to go to therapy too. And if I was a healed person like I claim to be, I should just get over it and move on. And I'm like, yeah, you don't just get over it and move on. And you can't change a coercive, controlling set of behaviors that have been ingrained in someone for over 40 years of existence in a week. That's not how it works.
And you also brought up a good point that I just want to touch on is sometimes I find that we can arm a predator with therapeutic knowledge as well.
Yes.
And they will spin it in a way as to arm themselves as a weapon. So they, if we give the coercive terminology to them, they will turn it on you. They will play a therapeutic role like, oh, I know what this, and now I'm going to use it on you. And it is very interesting.
Oh, the whole post-separation custody litigation thing is so precarious for victims to navigate because there is this, again, we're in a double bind where like we went for this evaluation and I had to tell the evaluator everything that he does that bothers me. The kids had to tell her everything that he does. Guess what? He reads that report. Now he knows every single thing we said.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's so violating and so scary. Luckily, the court took a lot of precautions in my case. They called us in proactively. That normally doesn't happen. You both will just get the report and read it, and then they're free to pop off and be as angry as they want. I was able to, securely safeguard the kids, and I had them, and he had to go get services, but that, again, always isn't the case. But even with all the subsequent case management conferences, we would have to disclose this is what's working, this isn't. And they're not using it to get better. They're using it. They're like taking mental notes. Oh, okay, that didn't work. Now I can try this. Mm-hmm. Oh, this didn't work. Oh, that pissed her off. I'm going to keep doing that. Oh, this made her upset. I'm going to do that. The only thing we're doing is churning more sophisticated abusers. We're not rehabilitating people. We're making them better. We're giving them more tools to use and weaponize. To your point, my ex now weaponizes therapy. He has trauma in his life that he's worked through in therapy, but now he was verbally abusive to the kids because he didn't know how to handle my abuse of him in the marriage. But now he has tools to handle my abusive ways. So now he's not going to do that to the kids, but I still need to go get help because I'm still an abuser. And I'm like, that is like literally Darbo.
Yeah,
like you have now turned the whole entire rhetoric of our case around on its head. And now he does the same thing to my daughter in reunification therapy. And in front of the therapist, he would sit there and say, you're just holding on to things, and healed people don't hold on to things. And you're just harping on things that I did, which was a correctable mistake. And you just need to get over it because you're going to have lifelong problems if you treat your father this way.
Yeah, we've heard those things before, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
That's just wild.
I mean, and if you don't have professionals who understand, which I would say the majority of professionals do not understand the dynamics of coercive control. As therapists, counselors, social workers, judges don't understand the nuances of coercive control. And without that language, you're hooped as a victim.
And that's why I always say There are some programs like batterers intervention programs, and not all of them are created equal. But if there is any hope, and I don't even think there is hope, but if there's any hope for these coercive controlling abusers, it's a group setting in batterers where they're held accountable and the program is good. Those are hard to find. But that being said, there has to be a victim aspect of any treatment for them. The clinicians have to talk to the victims. They have to talk to the family. Right. They have to believe the victims. Yeah. They have to understand the abuser from the victim's perspective, because, and this is what I always say to women who reach out to me, you know your predator best. You know them. You know how they've hunted you for years. You know what's going to tick them off. You know what's going to make them tick. You know what's going to make them upset, angry, whatever. You know what may make them calm down. You know what they're doing. You know that I knew my ex-husband didn't want my daughter's location because he was worried about her. He wants to see where she is. He wants to see where I am. They have to believe victims and they have to listen to them. It's so important, because if they're going to change, if there's any hope, they have to be held accountable.
Well, and children deserve to be recognized as human beings with basic human rights. Yes, they're developing and growing, but if they don't want to see a parent as a person who's around teenagers and young adults, I would say, well, let's listen to why that is occurring. Let's ask them why, because the instinct of a child is to be with their family. Their instinct of a child is to be in that relationship, unless there's something going on that's coercive or controlling or unhealthy. So,
and it's so much more than just like, I think a lot of people get fixated on like the word control. There's the problem I have with alienation is it's textbook, like they weaponize it against victims, right? Like I was never alienating my kids from my ex-husband. But if you really look at the behaviors that my ex was doing, he was trying to alienate the kids from me. He was trying to cut off my family from them, cut off contact with me from them. He made it very adversarial. Like I said, like that town sucks and mine's better and that sport team sucks and this is better. Everything he was doing was undermining my relationship with those kids, or trying to. And that is really, really, really what most abusers, coercive controllers, predators, whatever language you want to use, do. They try to tear down that relationship. And that is so damaging. And again, when you put up boundaries or kids don't want to deal with it, all of a sudden it's a problem. They're alienating me for no reason. And that's just not the case. But yeah, I don't know if a lot of professionals don't get it, or they just don't want to get it. My lawyer said to me recently, like, Courtney, even assholes get parenting time. And I'm like, okay, but we're not dealing with an asshole. We're dealing with a very dangerous, abusive person. That's very different. But the system and the people in it still just look at it in that scope, like, oh, you guys are just two assholes that are fighting. You're just get over it. You guys are divorced now. But it's so much more than that. It's so much more than that.
Drags you in as the victim, as an equal player, and equally responsible when you essentially may have zero culpability. But it's like, no, we're going to give you 50-50 anyways.
It's the dance. It's the dance metaphor that we've said. It's never a dance.
Never.
Not in this situation.
No.
This is like you're trying to dance and the person's cutting your legs off. It's like, I can't dance with that person.
Yeah, my friend said it recently, an older woman that I'm friends with, but she's very wise. She's like, you were ready for flag football and he came out with like full tackle gear on. Like you were not prepared for this.
Yeah.
And it's so true, right? Like it's not an even playing field at all. And I've dealt with so many different professionals, and, my answer is always the same. They're like, well, what is it that, you could do that would probably make him happy? I'm like, dropped dead, like literally dropped dead.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm laughing, but
That's true.
I'm sorry. It's true.
He'd probably be mad at you for that too, because you wouldn't, be able to provide the resources.
This is such a great conversation.
Yeah,
and thank you
Courtney,
so much for telling your
us.
story. Like, honestly, it for your vulnerability and the strength of telling your story in spite of all these legal maneuverings by a predator. Thank you. Thank you for your boldness. Thank you for what you're offering to New Jersey, but also the world.
Yeah.
And how can people find you or reach out to you?
So they can find me on NewJerseyProtectiveMoms.org. It's not just for New Jersey moms. I know that's the title, but it's me and my co-founder. We live in New Jersey, and we really were involved in getting coercive control passed here in Jersey, which just passed in December.
Awesome.
So we're excited about that. We're going to be working on a version of Caden's Law next for custody.
Great job.
And then abusive litigation. So more to come from us. But I'm also involved in a few other like nationwide groups. I'm doing some legislative work with a bunch of different divorce professionals in the Divorce Coalition. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but we're going to try to get some of the, 50 different states legislation kind of streamlined so everyone can kind of track what bills that pertain to coercive control in the states where they're at. So I am the committee chair there. I'm on the website, but you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, Courtney Gilmartin. I am public. Feel free to reach out to me. There's a ton of resources on NewJerseyProtectiveMoms.org. I have books, I have podcasts, I have professionals that I trust that are really well-versed in coercive control. So feel free to take a peek there, and any inquiries through the website goes right to me, and I answer everybody. So reach out. I'm here to help, listen, try to educate, help you navigate. It's definitely a tough road, but not one that can't be successfully navigated. That's for sure.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So appreciate
Thanks for
your
having
courage.
Me. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Courtney.
And I'll add your podcast to my website if you guys are okay.
Yeah,
with it.
Please do.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking when you were saying, I have podcasts, so I hope you have ours.
Yeah, I'll add you for sure. So
awesome.
Yes, thank you for telling your
thanks
story.
again.
Thanks, Courtney.